All right. Elder Scrolls Online 11.0.2 kicks off week 3 of the PTS cycle. The main focus of this week's PTS is to address a variety of fixes and improvements to the Worm Cult content, Ossian Cage, Chunk of Quest, overall improvements to smooth out gameplay. All right. For those looking for combat updates, don't worry. We're giving you a heads up that next week we'll have a large chunk of combat adjustments. Stay tuned for PTS week 4. So we'll see. We'll see. One thing that does worry me a little bit about this is it took so long to get this large chunk of combat adjustments all the way in week 4. And so by the time they see our feedback for the week 4 adjustments, it's too late for that to go into the patch. So pretty much, barring anything crazy, like what we see in next week in week 4 is pretty much what we're going live with, unless they do something drastically different from what they've done in the past. And so like doing it like this, you don't really leave room for more feedback. You just you can still give feedback and that might be addressed later, but in the past, typically how that works is that has been kicked down the road towards the next major update, so update 47. So it feels like everything is just so slow paced when it comes to like reaching out to the devs with feedback, them reaching back out to you saying, okay, we heard your feedback, this is what we're doing with it. And it's just this like, feels like we're in like sloth mode going back and forth with this. Like week 4 of the PTS for the large chunk of combat adjustments from the feedback. That's such a long period of time. And then to think it's probably, months before the next set will be reacted to. I don't know. So I feel like something has to give there. Like something needs to be improved with that system there, because by the time they're addressing our feedback has often moved on to something else, or it could, maybe new things have come up since then and things have changed. It's just, I don't think the delay back and forth is doing anyone any good. All right, so let's see what we got here. Combat and gameplay. Here we go. Nightblade Assassination reduced the crit chance gained to 6.6%, down from 8.8%, so losing 2.2% crit chance. We're just gonna have to wait till next week to see what else they're doing, because this obviously doesn't really resolve anything. Does it slightly bring them more in line, the assassination line with the others? It's the right direction, but it doesn't change anything. It's like, saying taking a few $1,000s from a billionaire is making him closer to my income. Like, technically true, but it doesn't really fix anything with what's going on here. And then a bunch of trial changes. I've only run this trial once on PTS, so I'm not gonna really know what's going on here. It looks like they've updated quite a lot, though. Looks like they're definitely making lots of adjustments as players test out the new trial, so that's good. I don't know if they're good adjustments or not. I'll let somebody else talk about these changes, like 8 Puppies or somebody that's actually in there doing the trial a bunch. But it's good to see that they're actually working on it a lot. All right, yeah, that's it for week 3. So I'll go through what I already sent to ZOS. This was after the week 2 patch notes, just to kind of I guess, catch y'all up on what I've submitted. If you have more stuff, feel free to send it to me. There's a section actually in my Discord server for submitting feedback. But this is kind of what I gathered already before this. And I guess, not really much to send that's different after this week. There not really any changes. So right now, key issues. Many interesting DPS skills are locked behind lines that don't have enticing damage passives. This leads to many of these skills being left behind even if they're really good. Examples of this are Crystal Fragments, Burning Talons, Ritual Retribution, and the list goes on. There's a ton of skills like this that are fun skills to use that just currently are not going to be worth it at all in the new subclassing system. So if each skill line had some kind of really strong DPS passive, this would A, have sticking with a base class still feel rewarding, as you'd have 3 good lines of damage passives instead of needing to subclass to get that. So you'd have that already baked in to your home class. And then if you wanted to multi-class out, you could still stick, you would still get good damage lines, but you wouldn't have to subclass to do that. B, this would cause a wider variety of lines to be more enticing to mix and match. So not just for the base class to be intact, but for subclassing, right now there's only like a handful of lines you even want to go with. So having more to pick from there, that, like, say I'm a Templar main, but I really like the Draconic Power line, there's really no reason to take that as a damage dealer, even though it has a couple of really fun damage skills in it. And then C, this would not be overtuned compared to what we have on the PTS now, because you can still only have 3 lines total. So, like, you're not going beyond what you can already do on the PTS. You're just getting that baked into your base class. So I came at this from a DPS perspective, but I think it holds true for other roles too. Right now, the very concentrated lines for tank and healer roles are also the clear winners. The gap is way too wide between base class and the high-end potential with subclassing. And the same is true for the less optimal lines, even if you are subclassing. So the love needs to be spread out a lot better on the different lines. Because right now, instead of it being like, I'm picking my themes that I want to put together to like play with this thematic build that feels good to me, it's like, okay, these are the damage lines. I hope the themes I like line up with those, or else I'm shooting myself in the foot taking another line. So an example of this, Draconic Power. This is the line that has Talons and Deep Breath. So the Elder Dragon passive, this gives health recovery per skill slotted in that line. It's just not a very good passive. So that could just be a really strong damage passive instead. But then this theme could be continued across other skill lines as well to diversify them more. So not just this line, but all of these lines that, they have skills that are fun to use in them, but they're just going to get left behind now with the new system. And then I had some specific skill line feedback. Ardent Flame is definitely not one of the worst right now. It's one of the, I'd say, top 5 or 6, but it still feels like it's a bit underwhelming compared to other class big damage lines. So the passives extending durations are really underwhelming when they only affect this specific skill line. So there's one that adds on time to your abilities within that skill line, and it's like, I feel like these are such a good opportunity in subclassing to create interesting things. And we've seen a little bit of this, like skills that work, or passives that work with dots, or passives that work with, a certain type of damage. All of a sudden, you could pull that into your kit when you're focusing in on that. But having, instead of those dot extensions only working for abilities in this line, it could work across all abilities or all flame and poison abilities. So think like Elfbane gives 5 seconds to flame dots. So what if this passive gave like 4 seconds to flame and poison dot, right? Something that is an interesting thing to take a skill line for other abilities too. Like the puzzle pieces fit together in different ways. Instead of like, I'm taking this skill line, but this only works within this line, So broadening that a bit more. They could also just add that extra time to the base abilities, like make engulfing flames and venomous claw, like make those last 24 seconds automatically, and then just make this passive something completely different. That would be another option. The same in the Earthen Heart line. The Eternal Mountain passive just extends abilities in that line. Same sort of philosophy could be done here. That Prismatics moving talents to that line was actually something sent even before I sent them this. So that was, maybe I should have included some of that stuff, but there was already feedback from week 1 sent over as well. This was kind of the second round of feedback. But yeah, I think that could that could be fun too, having Burning Talons in this line, but that doesn't really help the Draconic Power line. Just, yeah, there's a lot to it. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces here. Hey, what's up, ZJ? Okay, Assassination. This one they've been working on, probably a bit too overloaded for damage. It's showing up in pretty much every high-end setup. This would be a non-issue if other lines are brought up, though. And they've already tuned this one back in a couple of different ways with the Grim Focus light nerf, and then the nerf here on the patch notes to Master Assassin, 6.6%. But like I was saying, that doesn't really change anything. Like the overall landscape of where things are is still exactly the same. All right, Daedric Summoning. So my question here is, why are the passives in the Daedric Summoning line tied to having a pet active? You make the choice to have that locked in as one of your 3 skill line options. Shouldn't you have access to the passives, whether you want to have a permanent pet out or not? There are other skills in that line too that aren't pet based. I get the old system of having it separated for with or without pets, but with the new system, it seems like the passives could just exist, pet or not. Already not a great line to take if you aren't going to run pets. It could at least have some passives. Even if you did get all the passives, it would still not be a top choice for skill lines for no pet setups. But you don't even get all of them, so I don't know. If none of this is doable, maybe find a way to get bound armaments out of this skill line. But again, same thing with like Talons. I don't even know if that's the right way to go, because then you still have Haunting Curse in this line. Like, what is Haunting Curse doing in this skill line now? It's the opposite morph of Daedric Prey, for those that don't know. It has nothing to do with pets. It's always been the morph of that ability that sorcerers take that aren't running pets. It's just, there's kind of a big mess within this skill line right now. So at the very least, you could get your passives if you're going to take that line and use a couple of the abilities in it. Next is Dark Magic. This line is also kind of a mess right now. It's obviously meant to be more utility focused, yet one of the most iconic sorcerer abilities is in here and stuck behind bad passives for damage. Talking about Crystal Fragments. Like, there is zero, like, no matter how much you like Crystal Fragments, there's no reason to take this line just for that. So it's just, like, again, another iconic ability just kind of gets left in the dust. Dawn's Wrath, more of the same, really. This is the line that has Power of the Light and a Jesus Beam. So having no damage passives is an immediate death sentence in this new era of subclassing. Even with nice skills, this line is underperforming compared to the rest. I don't count Minor Sorcery. This is one of their passives they get, because it is a group-wide buff, and a support could provide this or the Brutality version in the Earthen Heart line. So both of those are buffs that only one person needs and the whole group gets it. So it doesn't really feel that great as being your like only damage passive in that line when someone else could just give that to you. Gravelord. Gravelord Sacrifice and Rapid Rot is a bit too crazy of a combo to add to Fate Carver. So right now these two add 25% damage to the Fate Carver beam. So I don't want to see these gutted because I think they're fine as is, if not even like a bit underwhelming for dot builds. But the interaction between them and Arcanist makes it too much of a must-run skill for Fate Carver. So like if you're running Beam and you're not running Gravelord, you're just you're missing out on an insane amount of damage. So like I think fun and interesting interactions like this it's cool to have, but they shouldn't be so strong that if you're not doing it, it's just like you're left way, way, way behind. Winter's Embrace, this line is pretty close to being good. It doesn't quite hang with the other like big damage lines, but it's not as nearly as far away as some of these other lines, like Draconic Power and like some of these other non-traditional damage lines. Not nearly that far away. The Piercing Cold passive could use more juice for frost damage or some other damage bonus in addition to it. So right now it just gives 10% damage to frost damage, which is cool, but like that could be like 20% and it wouldn't be overpowered. So something extra there to juice this line up a little more. And then some specific skill feedback. Obviously, there's more lines that need adjustment than this, but these were just some that had popped up. So Assassin's Blade, this is the Nightblade Execute. It'd be really cool to see these morphs scale dynamically instead of split into mag or stam. Then both mag and stand setups could have a ranged or a melee execute. Ideally, the stam scaling version could always be disease and the Magicka one always magic, but I don't know if that's possible. But after hybridization, feels weird that Magblade is stuck with ranged execute and Stamblade is stuck with the melee execute. So if you want to do a bow, for example, on a Stamblade and like have a ranged build, then you still have to come into melee for execute. And then vice versa with Magblade. If you want to play a melee Magicka Nightblade, it would be nice to get to use Killer's Blade since it's stronger. But yeah, it's just, I thought this one, thought it would be cool if those scaled dynamically. So both versions could use a ranged or a melee execute, depending on their build. Bound Armaments, this did not need a damage nerf. It was already weaker than Grim Focus, and now even more so. I see it more often run on the back bar just as a passive boost because the active is very underwhelming. This is one of those changes they made that had me scratching my head like, I couldn't believe they nerfed it. It was already like not a super popular skill to run the active for, and then they nerfed it more. And they buffed Grim Focus, so it's weird. I mean, I guess Grim Focus is back now to the weapon and spell damage values that it was before. So I'd like to see this come back at least to the damage it was before. And it's locked behind a worse skill line for damage too, so it just doesn't have a lot going for it. Daedric Prey.
Hi.
So I don't think causing it to affect only the sorcerer pets was the best call. I ran a full pet build with Gravelord, Animal Companions, and Daedric Summoning, and Daedric Prey was not even worth running. I just dropped it and my DPS went up. So 50% to all pets. I said it's probably overloaded, but now the more I've looked at it, I don't even know if it is. Like, now this is comparing to what I'm seeing other combinations do. Like if other high-end combos were brought down, then yeah, maybe this would be overloaded. I'll change that to maybe, because I don't even know if it would be. So originally what I sent is maybe 50% to sorcerer pets and 25% to other pets, but I think it could maybe just go back to 45 and be to both. But they could also just reduce the full amount some and make it affect all pets and then just buff the base damage of the Sorc pets to compensate. Sad to see the fun interactions go away with Maw of the Infernal and other pet-based sets. And Fate Carver seems a bit overtuned with subclassing. Maybe take away a bit of that 8% buff it was given, but remove the target cap and some of the cost. Also, the interaction with Necro is giving it 25% more damage, which we talked about already. Probably a bit too much, though those passives seem fine aside from this one specific skill. This is slightly behind what single targets can do. This is slightly behind what single target setups can do already, so it doesn't need a massive nerf, but it is a little overtuned currently for the AoE potential it offers. So the Fate Carver setups, I think we're topping out at like 175k in week 2, 174, somewhere in there. And the not Fate Carver setups, the more direct damage setups, were topping out at like 180. So like 175 to 180. But those 180 setups were heavily single target, while this is just heavily AoE. So I feel like that gap is probably a little bit too small, considering like, okay, yeah, I'm going to take a tiny DPS loss and just have jacked AoE on everything. I mean, it's kind of the clear-cut winner. I don't think it... I'm always nervous about giving feedback like this because of how ZOS adjusts things with their giant sledgehammer. It just needs a little bit. Like, doesn't need to go crazy down. Leave it as a fun, strong option for people, but right now it's just a little overtuned. Mage's Fury. This is another really cool thematic skill that has heavily underperformed in PvE forever now due to PvP concerns. Be fun to see this as a spammable and an execute all in one, maybe without the delayed burst on that morph, or maybe even an extra % modifier to monsters if separating morphs won't work out. Dynamic stat scaling could be nice on this too, so Stam Sorcs can run this a little easier. Molten Whip, the passive on this feels a bit underwhelming when compared to other stacking skills such as Grim Focus. Not only does it take casting Ardent Flame abilities to keep it up instead of the easier light or heavy attack condition, it only stacks up to 300 for 15 seconds. instead of being able to hold it indefinitely. So it's really hard to keep this up for trash, especially since you can only build the stacks in combat. And that passive being tied to the Molten Whip morph also makes the other morph pretty dead. It'd be nice to see the passive on Molten Whip just put on the base ability and go to both morphs, and then differentiate those morphs in a different way. Yeah, because right now it's just like, this is by far the best because of that passive. Nova, please consider taking the Major Mame off. Please. The Solar Prison morph could then be made into a competitive damage ultimate, and Solar Disturbance could have some actual useful debuff to be tied to an ultimate instead of something that can be accessed with regular skills. Yeah, I mean, this is one we've been calling for a while now, and it's like Major Mame is being added to more and more just regular skills, and yet that's part of the power budget for this ultimate. Feels kind of strange in today's game, and yeah, I'd love to see that one updated. Radiant Destruction, so this is the Jesus Beam skill. A bit more risky, but currently far outperformed by taking Assassination and Killer's Blade. Possible solution, reduce it to 3 seconds, but keep the 7 ticks. So right now it's 4.8 seconds, but it ticks 7 times. So it actually ticks a little bit slower than it does on live. Hello, Abby. Say hello. Oh, say hello. Oh, grumpy girl. That's a grumpy face. So I think maybe if a lot of people aren't liking the long time on it either. So maybe reduce it to 3 seconds, but keep the 7 ticks so it ticks faster than before. It is rollable now in PvP, so it does give it a little more juice there, considering they've nerfed it on the other end. Also gives it its own unique cadence, separate from Arcanist Beam. So, yeah, I mean, right now it just feels like pretty much the same as Arcanist Beam, except there's not as much choice about what you're doing while you're holding it. Like with the Arcanist Beam, since it's just AoE and it's not connected to anyone, you can kind of move around and position. This, you're just locked on to someone and you're just kind of holding it on them. So having a shorter duration, I think, makes a little more sense. This would also help to keep up Reliquin or Hawkeye stacks or any other light attack required conditions that the current 4.8 second version does not play nicely with. Or they could just completely revert it back to 1.8. I mean, that's another option also. I don't think 4.8 landed where it should. Just had too many like knock-on negative effects. So overall, currently it feels like there is more risk with less reward than before, and more so I had already written this. More negative knock-on effects, and the skill line has no offensive passives aside from minor sorcery, which is a group-wide buff, and support could provide this or the brutality version. This also is reported to no longer be sustainable on Stamina Templar. I have seen some, I guess, sustaining it if you swap potions when you get to execute, which it's not really a thing that most players are going to even consider doing. Like, some few will, but maybe some dynamic scaling needs to be in place or some other solution to allow for Stamina Templars to better utilize this. All right, then we have the trial sets. None of them are very appealing or exciting. We haven't seen any adjustments to those yet. Don't know what's going on here with these. Haven't heard even a peep about them. Recovery Convergence is the healer set. It's just another sustain set with a long cooldown. How many of these do we need in the game? We have more than enough sustain options if that's what you're looking for. The problem's already solved. I feel like if you want sustain, that problem has long been 6-7 years ago resolved in the game. Like, we don't need to keep putting in sets that are solutions to it. Especially when they're not like interesting, unique solutions to it. It's done. We can sustain if we need to. Like, we have tools to do that. We don't need more sets from Trials that do that. Or from anywhere, for that matter. Harmony and Chaos. This is the light DPS set. 430 weapon and spell damage is way too low for requiring 5 synergies and maintaining synergy activations every 10 seconds. Even if it only required 1 synergy, it still wouldn't be a popular set. Especially not with 5. This one needs a lot of work. Caspian's Cruel Signet seems like it's just bugged. It does almost no damage, even with multiple targets. So this one's supposed to scale up, kind of like Azurblight does, the more targets you hit. But even with 3 targets, it was hitting for less than an absorbed stamina glyph. So something's just wrong with it, but I haven't heard a word out of them on this. What's going on? Like, do y'all have y'all seen that it's bugged? Is it being worked on? Anything? Like, any kind of feedback on what's going on here would be great. Dolores Arena has potential, but not seeing any excitement around using it. Condition to trigger it is kind of wonky with how it works. It's like it drops when you're bar swapping as well, even if you're still holding block. And it looks like you lose all your stacks when you drop block instead of them slowly ticking down. So this one could be improved a lot to make it a little bit more interesting. Then we have Basai and Coral. These are ones I see frequent feedback around. I think making these just both max out at 50% so they're easier to use, but maybe lowering the top end, 10% and 600 weapon and spell damage. They'd still be really strong, good sets, but they wouldn't feel like Coral specifically wouldn't feel like it's way ahead of the pack like it is currently, and it would allow more players to interact with these sets a little better. Like, even if you're not doing the best job with it, you know, if you're like at 60% of your resource, you're pretty close to the max amount already at that point, so it's a little more forgiving. And Basai especially, like, yeah, like you can't even reach the max amount, so bringing it down from 12% to 10, but you get there at 50% instead of 0%. I think just be a nice quality of life for both of these sets to be a little easier to use across the board. And they'd both be useful still. Those are good stat lines. Miscellaneous feedback. Leaderboard issue. Respec scrolls should not work in leaderboard content, or armory assistants should be allowed in leaderboard content. One or the other. Because right now you can't use your armory assistant in leaderboard content to swap setups, but you can use respec scrolls. So this just feels a little weird, and it feels like, especially with subclassing, since you can change your subclass lines with respec scrolls, this is gonna pressure people that are really pushing for best scores on stuff to possibly utilize this. Then again, with how unbalanced it is at the moment, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter. But yeah, I think this is definitely something that should be looked at one way or another. Monster sets. There are many thematic and fun monster sets that just don't do damage well enough to use. This is just a long-term issue here. Got like a couple of monster sets that get used for DPS, and the rest are just vastly underperforming. Sorcerer class mastery would be nice to be adjusted for use with banner to deal a higher amount, since it's only once every 5 seconds. So yeah, this one's weird because it's the sorcerer class mastery for damage is decent if you're hitting with something like using a skill that triggers it a lot. But on banner, it's once every 5 seconds. So it's like it feels like it shouldn't just be a copy paste. It should actually be a different value, or maybe the time should be shorter on the Sorcerer one. Because you get like 1k DPS out of this. It's just really weird. Doesn't feel worth it at all. Templar class mastery adjusted to, yeah, this one, it's based on a specific skill line right now, like sitting in your rune or whatever, but I forget the exact name of what they call it. Doesn't have to be your rune, it can be other abilities in that line. But it would be nice if the Templar class mastery was just adjusted to something like dealing damage or healing with a Templar class skill to trigger it instead. Because it's stuck behind the restoration line. But yeah, that's currently what I've sent them. And nothing's really changing, I guess, from this week. Sacred Ground, thank you. But yeah, we'll see next week what they do. But yeah, that's it. That's the week 3 patch notes and the feedback I've given so far. Bye-bye.